How much have you paid for your Facebook account recently? Or your YouTube account? 0. How are they worth more than $1 trillion in market value? They monetize our attention. The way they get that attention is by influencing you and using these dark patterns or tricks to do it. So the way they do it with children is they say, how many likes or followers do you have? So they basically get children addicted to getting attention from other people. They use filters, likes, et cetera, beautification filters that enhance your self-image. And after 2 decades in decline, the mental health of teen girls, high depressive symptoms, there's an image here that they'll be able to show, went up 170% after the year 2010 with the rise of Instagram, et cetera. So the thing I think people need to get is that we are 10 years into this mind warp where we have been fed a individualized reality. Roger McNamee, who had on here a few years ago, talks about it as the Truman Shows. We've got 3 billion Truman Shows. And everyone thinks that because, imagine a husband and wife couple. They follow the same friends on Facebook. They've got the same friends, so if they open up Facebook, they should see the same feed. But that's not actually how it works. They'll actually see completely different realities based on what the algorithms will say, this is the thing that's likely to keep you here. And what that did is took the shared reality we have, put it through a paper shredder, and gave each of us a micro-reality in which we're more and more certain that we're right and the other side is wrong, and it's totally confused us. Imagine your Facebook, and you had 2 different kinds of news feeds. One was called the affirmation feed. It just gave people things that agree with you, right? And then the other feed they had was the challenge your views feed. And every time it just showed you something that was like, the world is not as you think it is. Which of those 2 feeds are you going to use more often and more addictively and keep you coming back? The affirmation feed. And so between those 2, we say it's like a polarization for profit business model because they make more money the more they divide society into narrower and narrower Truman Shows where each of us get our own reality. So they actually control the measurement of how bad the problem is. So this is ridiculous. It's almost like if you take the monopoly conversation, it's a vertically integrated company that owns both the measurement, either the exclusive access to measurement of the harm and also the harm creation.
The real genius of these things was that they weren't just offering this thing you could do. They found ways of keeping people engaged. I think this is important for people to get, that they're not competing for your data or for money. They're competing to keep people using the product.
Every time I check my phone, I'm playing the slot machine to see what am I going to get, right? Every time I'm checking my email, I'm playing the slot machine to see what am I going to get. Every time I scroll a news feed, I'm playing the slot machine to see what am I going to get next. Every time you use a dating app, you're playing the slot machine to see if you got a match, right? This is ubiquitous.
How many people here have felt or believe that Facebook is listening to your microphone because you were just talking with a friend about something and then you go to Facebook and there's an ad for the thing you were just talking about. So raise your hands. How many people think? Okay, so I want you to look around. There's at least 60% of people who raise their hands. I happen to know the actually now former senior vice president of advertising at Facebook who has assured me, and also the external data forensics show, they don't do this. They don't listen to the microphone. So this is from something called the Baader-Meinhof effect, that we perceive that if 2 things happen around the same time, they must be linked. There's a coincidence. So how is it, though, that they are able to make that prediction? Well, the truth is it's even more scary that they're listening on the microphone is that they don't have to, because what they do is they wake up your little avatar voodoo doll, and then they just make predictions about what kinds of things you would be talking about, and the kinds of things you'd be talking about are so predictable that we actually already know what you were talking about.
These things are competing for your attention, that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, but the thing that is the product is your predictable behavior. You're using the product in predictable ways.
There's new evidence showing that just by looking at people's click patterns alone, so just the way you click around on a computer and the time delays between your clicks, you can actually predict people's big 5 personality traits with 80% accuracy.
Facebook has something called loyalty prediction, where they can actually predict to an advertiser when you're about to become disloyal to a brand. So if you're a mother and you take Pampers diapers, they can tell Pampers, hey, this user is about to become disloyal to this brand. So in other words, they can predict things about us that we don't know about our own selves. And that's a new level of asymmetric power.
There's an asymmetry of power, where the technology has an asymmetric access to all of your vulnerabilities. They can control the outcomes of your biases, beliefs, etc. When we have an asymmetry of power, we have a name for that relationship to make sure it's not predatory or extractive. and it's a fiduciary relationship. If you compare how much information does Facebook have about you compared to a psychotherapist, I would argue in these other areas where we already apply fiduciary law, it's actually way more. So just based on the strict comparison between how much a lawyer knows more about the law versus their client, how much a doctor knows more than their patient, a psychotherapist versus their patient, they know more, so let's apply fiduciary law. What that does is it instantly kills the business model, because you can't have a doctor who's simultaneously operating on your interest and maximizing shareholder profits.
Now, if this is making you feel a little bit of outrage, notice that that thought just comes over you. Outrage is a really good way also of getting your attention. Because we don't choose outrage, it happens to us. And if you're the Facebook news feed, whether you'd want to or not, you actually benefit when there's outrage. Because outrage doesn't just schedule a reaction in an emotional time space for you. We want to share that outrage with other people. So it was found in a study that for every word of moral outrage that you add to a tweet, it increases your retweet rate by 17%.
So now, if you think of it, the companies are competing for our attention. If they find out that each of us becoming a celebrity and having 1 million people we get to reach, if that's the currency of the thing that gets us to come back to get more attention, then they're competing at who can give us that bigger fame lottery hit faster.
It was much cheaper to, instead of getting your attention, to get you addicted to getting attention from other people. And this has created the kind of mass narcissism and mass cultural thing that's happening with young people, especially today.
When the internet is just a tool, it's a library, it's actually mostly okay. It's the active recommendation system. It's when it wants something from you. It's when it has an incentive to personalize. Those are when all these other issues show up. And so I think that the point is that culture has to be above technology. If technology goes above culture and it starts to decide what culture is, what our values are, what kids want, so you have a whole generation growing up as narcissism and how many followers you have and whether you have an Instagram account with 50,000 followers is the value. That's technology taking over, crawling down the brain stems of children and actually inserting their values into your children. That's not okay. Culture has to be above technology. That's the main thing.
When kids go on vacation, it's been shown they give their passwords up to 5 other friends to keep their snap streaks going.
You know, we talk to teachers a lot in our work at the Center for Humane Technology, and they will say that on Monday morning, this is before COVID, but on Monday morning, they spend the first hour of class having to clear all the drama that happened on social media from the weekend for the kids.
Jesus.
And imagine that we have a societal IQ or a societal problem-solving capacity. The US has a societal IQ. Russia has a societal IQ. Germany has a societal IQ. How good is a country at solving its problems? Now imagine that what does social media do to our societal IQ?
You know, YouTube, for example, recommended Alex Jones' InfoWars conspiracy theories 15 billion times, which is more than the combined traffic of New York Times, Washington Post, Guardian, Fox News combined. And when you just realize the scale of all of that, conspiracy theories are especially dangerous because they're like a trust bomb. They warp your perception of everything that comes after it. In fact, the best predictor of whether you'll believe in a new conspiracy theory is whether I already got you to believe in one. Is YouTube a publisher? Well, they're not generating the content. They're not paying journalists. They're not doing that. But they are recommending things. And I think that we need a new class between, the New York Times is responsible if they say something that defames someone else, that reaches a certain 100 million or so people. When YouTube recommends flat earth conspiracy theories hundreds of millions of times, and if you consider that 70% of YouTube's traffic is driven by recommendations, meaning driven by what they are recommending, what an algorithm is choosing to put in front of the eyeballs of a person, if you were to backwards derive a motto, it would be, with great power comes no responsibility. If the flat earth theory is true, it means not just that all of government is lying to you, but all of science is lying to you. So think about that for a second. That's like a meltdown of all of our rational epistemic understanding of the world.
And they'll say, okay, shoot, you're right. Flat Earth, we got to deal with that. And so they'll tweak the algorithm. And then people make a bunch of noise about the Thinspiration videos for anorexia for kids, and they'll deal with that problem. But then they start doing it based reactively. But again, if you zoom out, it's just still recommending stuff that's kind of from the crazy town.
We need to acknowledge that we are persuadable. Once you start understanding that your mind can be scheduled into having little thoughts or little blocks of time that you didn't choose, wouldn't we want to use that understanding and protect against the way that happens? I think we need to see ourselves fundamentally in a new way. It's almost like a new period of human history, like the Enlightenment, but almost a kind of self-aware enlightenment, that we can be persuaded. And there might be something we want to protect. Moreover, our democracy depends on people's ability to sustain their attention on the topics that we collectively care about. And when we're seduced by the next wave of a thing, we're not able to do that.
That in the same way that industrial capitalism, a whale is worth more dead than alive, and a tree is worth more as lumber than as a tree, a human being in the attention model is worth more if they're addicted, distracted, outraged, polarized, and disinformed than they are if there is a human being, whether that's your kid or that's a person or a citizen in a democracy. And that's not because anyone's evil, it's just what the model prefers, in the same way that the model would prefer that someone is diabetic first and then we sell them a subscription plan.
We massively underestimate the vulnerability of culture. We've been leaving our digital borders wide open. And this is really important because if Russia or China try to fly a plane into the physical United States, or they try to get across the passport controls, we have huge billions of dollars invested in either shooting down that plane or stopping them at the border.
Well, I mean, this has caused genocides, right? So in Myanmar, which is in the film, the Rohingya Muslim minority group, many Rohingya were persecuted and murdered because of fake information spread by the government on Facebook, using their asymmetric knowledge with fake accounts. I mean, even just a couple weeks ago, Facebook took down a network of, I think, several 100,000 fake accounts in Myanmar. And they didn't even have at the time more than something like 4 or 5 people in their extended Facebook network who even spoke the language of that country.
Oh, God.
There's actually a joke within Facebook that if you want to know which countries will be, quote unquote, at risk in 2 years from now, look at which ones have Facebook free basics.
Jesus.
And more of our economic activity is moving from the physical to the digital, but we don't protect the digital borders. So if Russia and China try to fly an information plane into the virtual United States, instead of being met by the Pentagon to shoot it down, they're met by a Facebook algorithm with a white glove that says, yeah, exactly which zip code or minority group would you like to target with more divisive information that could stir up culture wars.
The people in Myanmar who got persecuted and murdered didn't have to be on Facebook for the fake information spread about them to impact them, for people to go after them, right? So this is the whole, I can assert something about this minority group. That minority group isn't on Facebook, but if it manipulates the dominant culture to go, we have to go kill them, then they can go do it. If you zoom out to the global context, all of us, we don't use Facebook in Brazil, but if Brazil, which was heavily, the last election was skewed by Facebook and WhatsApp, where something like 87% of people saw at least one of the major fake news stories about Bolsonaro, and he got elected, and you have people in Brazil chanting, Facebook, Facebook, when he wins, and then he sets a new policy to wipe out the Amazon. All of us don't have to be on Facebook to be affected by a leader that wipes out the Amazon and accelerates climate change timelines because of those interconnected effects.
So I think that this really is the issue we can all unite around, and that gives me an incredible hope. And I think, as you said, awareness precedes the opportunity for choice. I think the question everyone can ask themselves is, instead of my attention being the commodity, we can also ask what is worth our attention individually, and also what is worth our attention as a country, because I think the current attention economy does not reflect what really matters to us.
The technology issues are going to increase and accelerate much faster than governments can catch up, which is why our problem statement for our organization is, going back to E.O. Wilson, the fundamental problem of humanity is we have Paleolithic minds, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And those operate on 3 different clock rates, because your Paleolithic brain was fixed 200,000 years ago, and that's baked, it's not changing. Your medieval institutions go update every 4 or 5 years, maybe. You get GDPR passed after 5 years. And then you have accelerating godlike technology that's creating new processes of new possibilities and risks and harm much faster. So if you think about it, we have to embrace our Paleolithic minds, upgrade our medieval institutions, and then slow down and have the wisdom to actually wield godlike technology. That's the only way.
Solving this problem is critical infrastructure for solving every other problem. There's nothing in your life or in our collective problems that does not require our ability to put our attention where we care about. At the end of our lives, all we have is our attention and our time. What will be time well spent for ours? Thank you.